following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to another episode of Genesis. As always, I am your host, Ian Kahanowitz, and today we're going to have a great baseball session. We're going back into the archives, into the 19th century. We're going to be talking about Hall of Famer Cap Anson. And, of course, today is January 31st, and hopefully the weather will be warming soon, because today up in Boston it is 2 degrees. So I would welcome a sunny diamond and beautiful green grass over this frozen tundra. Anyhow, you are listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network with the man himself, the Zigzag Man, Ralph Tycho. And let me tell you, folks, been on the network now. This is my third season, and the network just keeps getting better. Ralph has really built a nice little niche for himself with all these podcasts. Of course, Pitches and Catches report in about 3 weeks, and we got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend with the Patriots, who I live probably 8 minutes away from Gillette Stadium, are going once again to the Super Bowl, and I think they're going to do it. A little tidbit, 17 years on February 3rd, 2002, Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl against the Rams. He has come full circle as the Patriots play the Rams this Sunday, February 3rd. 17 years apart, an amazing career by Tom Brady. And, of course, he's a shoo-in to the Hall of Fame for football. But now we turn to another Hall of Famer, Cap Anson. Now, he was born in 1852, so many of you who don't really understand or know history, he pretty much was born before the Civil War. And he was born in the Midwest, in Marshalltown, Iowa. And he was a first baseman for a while. He played a record 27 seasons. He was regarded as one of the greatest players of his era and one of the first superstars of the game. Anson spent most of his career with the Chicago Cubs franchise, then known as the White Stockings and later the Colts, serving as the club's manager, first baseman, and later in his tenure, minority owner. He led the team to 5 National League pennants in the 1880s. Anson was one of baseball's first great hitters and probably the first to tally over 3,000 career hits, as records were not kept up like they are today. His contemporary influence and prestige are required by historians as playing a major role, and this is important, in establishing the racial segregation in professional baseball that persisted well into the late 40s until Jackie Robinson was able to break the color barrier in 1947. And what we do know of Anson was that on several occasions, Anson refused to take the field when the opposing roster included black players. And in those years, prior to the Gentleman's Agreement, in and around 1890, there were black players, including Moses Fleet Walker and a few others who were allowed to play along white teammates. And what happened was Anson might have influenced the most noted vote in the 19th century of the favor of segregation as a Gentleman's Agreement, a July 14th, 1887, won by the High Minor International League to ban the signing of new contracts with black players. And, of course, the international leagues were different, but Cap Anson's influence was felt into the rival or outlaw leagues at the time. Now, what happened is, in his early life, again, like I mentioned, he was born in Iowa. Now, in 1866, he was about 14, he spent 2 years at the high school, age boarding school of the University of Notre Dame after being sent there by his father in hopes of curtailing his mischievousness. His time away did little to discipline him. Soon after he returned home, his father sent him to the University of Iowa, where his bad behavior resulted in the school asking him to leave after one semester. So already we know Anson has a dubious character. Now, he played on a number of competitive baseball clubs in his youth and began to play professionally in the National Association probably at the age of 19, primarily playing third base for the Rockford Forest Cities, one of the original teams of the association. He was a large and powerful man, standing at 6 feet tall and weighing about 220. Now, what you should know here is that the National Association was before the creation of the National League in 1876. And so baseball really didn't have much of an established league at the time. The rules were in constant evolution, and Cap Anson was one of the pioneers of playing modern baseball as the game evolved itself. Now, in 1872, he was traded to the Philadelphia Athletics, and his career really started flourishing as he became the top 5 in the National Association in batting, on-base percentage, on-base slugging. He led the National Association in OBP in 1872. Now, when the National League was opened in 1876, the White Stockings won the first league title. And by that time, Anson was on the team. He was a solid hitter, but he wasn't quite yet a superstar. But his fortunes and those of his team would change. Anson would be named captain manager of the club in 1879. He was about 27 years old. His new role led to the name of Cap, though newspapers typically called him the more Captain Anson or Captain Anson abbreviated. With Anson pacing the way, the White Stockings won 5 pennants between 1880 and 1886, one of the most dominating performances by any teams in the history of Major League Baseball. Of course, we could think of the New York Yankees in the 1950s when they won 5 World Series in a row. We're sorry about that, folks. Had a breakup. It's very cold up here, and so I might be dropping the line a few times, but we continue on. Now, what goes on here with Anson is he becomes the manager of the White Stockings, and he employs modern techniques, including a third base coach, having one fielder back up another, signaling batters, and the rotation of 2-star pitchers. And let me just say something. Probably up until the point of about 10 years ago, pitchers were workhorses. Look at Maddox, look at Glavine, look at all the guys in the 60s and 70s, and they pitched well near 250 to 300 innings a year. We'll never see that kind of pitching again with the stats that they use in the 5 innings and out. Back then, especially in the dead ball era, pitchers would usually have a 3 or 4 man rotation. Cy Young, Walter Johnson, they were able to get to 513 wins, 479 wins, because they pitched so often until their arms fell off. And so in those days, you had usually one pitcher. Now Cap Anson started to have what was called a rotation. And he also knew that speed played a part in the baseball realm, and he recruited Mike Kelly, who can aggressively run bases, forcing the opposition into making errors. Cap Anson was a very thinking kind of manager. He really cultivated his players. He really was truly the first, I'd say, professor of baseball who began to strategize about how to outwin and outwit and, out-hit an opponent. The hit and run. you start a player off running off first base, and you take a swing and you try to advance him. A lot of the history is attributed to Cap Anson. Now, Anson also was the innovator of spring training. Hey, and along with the president of the club, the Chicago club, Albert Spalding, yes, he makes all the rubber balls and all of the sporting goods we know. They were the first to send their clubs to warmer climates in the South to prepare for the season. The most notable, which lasted well into the dead ball era, was Hot Springs, Arkansas. They first did this in 1886. Now, on the field, Anson was the team's best hitter and run producer, bar none. In the 1880s, he won 2 battle titles, both in 1881 and 1888, and finished second 4 times. During the same period, he led the leagues in runs batted in. 7 times he did that. His best season was 1881 when he led the league in batting, OBP, OPS, hits, total bases, and ribbies. He also became the first player to hit 3 consecutive home runs, 5 homers in 2 games, 4 doubles in a game, as well as being the first to perform 2 unassisted double plays in a game. He is only one of the few players to score 6 runs in a game, a feat he accomplished on August 24th, 1886. Anson signed a 10-year contract in 1888 to manage the White Stockings. Now, this is very interesting, but because of a typographical error he failed to spot, ended after the 1897 season instead of 1898. But his best years were behind him by then. He led the league in walks in 1890 and garnered his 8th and final Ribby crown in 1891. On the managerial front, he failed to win another pennant. As the end of the 1880s approached, the club began trading away its stars in favor of young players, with the exception of Anson. Local newspapers had to start to call the team the Anson Colts, just Colts, before the decade went out. With the advent of the Players League, which was a rival outlaw league created because of the working conditions that the players had to endure by the management, were taken, a lot of the talent was drained away to the Players Association. Bigger pay, more opportunity. And the team name, Colts, never official, became standard usage in local media. What happened was he mellowed with age. He mellowed enough. He wasn't this hard-bitten, ruthless kind of player that he was earlier on. He became a fatherly figure and was also called Pop. When he was fired as manager after the 1897 season, it also marked the end of his 27-year playing career. The following seasons, newspaper dubbed the Colts the Orphans, as they had lost their Pop. Now, in 1939, Cap Anson was elected to the Hall of Fame. Now, he had died years before in 1922. Now, of course, we go back to the 1920s and the 1930s, and segregation was well knee-deep rooted in American society. Now, we must understand the time period here. Anson refused to play in games versus dark-skinned players. Where he became racist, I have no clue. But on August 10th, 1883, he refused to play an exhibition game against the Toledo Blue Stockings because their catcher, Moses Fleetwood Walker, was an African-American. When Blue Stockings manager Charlie Moulton told Anson the White Sox would forfeit the gate receipts if they refused to play, Anson backed down. He didn't want to lose the gate receipts because in those years, baseball players, it was pretty much like when you served at a dinner table and you have 10 brothers and sisters and a plate of food comes in. Everyone's going to be grabbing for it, so you better hurry up and do it, otherwise you're not going to have any gate receipts. You're not going to have any food for that matter. Now, next year, Chicago played an exhibition at Toledo, which was now a new league, an American Association, which was a major league. Walker sat it out. And to this day, historians are still unclear why he did so. They say he was injured. But now, whether he was injured or not, Walker was still playing in that game. And this incident is unique because private correspondences between Cap Anson provide some insight. 3 months before the game, Chicago Treasurer Secretary John A. Brown wrote the Toledo manager, Charlie Morton, that the management of the Chicago Ball Club have no personal feeling about the matter. While the players do most decisively and object to preserve harmony in the club, it is necessary that I have your assurance in writing that Walker will not play any position in your 9 that field July 25th. I have no doubt such is your meaning. Only your letter does not express in full. I have no desire to replay the occurrences of last season and must have your guarantee to that effort. Now, what happened was that year, Walker and his brother Weldy were released from the Toledo team that year. Weldy last played on August 6th and Fleet on September 4th. On July 14th, 1887, the White Sox played an exhibition against the Newark Little Giants. African-American George Stovey was listed in the Newark News as the scheduled Newark starting pitcher. Anson objected, and Stovey did not pitch. Moreover, International League owners voted 6-4, meeting in Buffalo in the morning of the game to exclude African-American players from future contracts. Now, going back to the Toledo game, what was also a thing, Cap refused to play, but Walker was injured as well, and so was Cap, at least he said. But we still don't know, like I mentioned, whether that holds true or not because of the letters that were sent that indicated that Cap Anson had no desire to play against any African American. Now, Anson's behavior would not be tolerated today. He belittled umpires, threatened them, but big things here. Big things were betting. And in those years, players, managers, and owners, it was regarded as acceptable so long as they did not bet against their team. They could bet, because then you'd be accused of throwing games. Now, Anson has that mark against him. But what's very noted is that Cap Anson was probably, I usually give Ty Cobb the gift of being the first superstar in baseball. But I think Cap Anson might have been the first superstar, not only for his play, but his influence on the town of Chicago, in the other leagues, and the fact that he had won so many pennants as he did. He died in 1922 from a glandular ailment. He was interred at the Oakwood Cemetery in Chicago. Now, my question is, a lot of the people here tell me today that many Hall of Fame players who are in the Hall of Fame should not be in the Hall of Fame. And if we judge people by our time period and not the time period they played in, I would say, yes, take them out. Cap Anson was a racist. There is no doubt about it. The time period permitted that racism to go on. And as I always say, for the voting for like Gil Hodges or Marvin Miller, you have to take into account the player or managers or business executives' time period and the work he did that embodied the reason why he was in the Hall of Fame. Gil Hodges deserves to be into the Hall of Fame, okay? Next year will be his last eligibility for the Veterans Committee. Gil Hodges was fifth in home runs when he had passed in 1972. He was up there with many of the greats. He was a long-time dominant player, but he has gotten lost into the shuffle as time has gone by and so many major leaguers have come and gone. For Cap Anson, we know today he is not a nice guy. He would definitely not be in the Hall of Fame if he had played in modern times, but given his importance to the leagues in the 19th century and his pioneering of the sport, along with many of the things that happen today on the playing field, and the fact that the United States was a segregated country, and that this kind of material and stuff was allowed not only by baseball, but by the American government, by every major city in the United States, I feel that Cap Anson should stay in the Hall of Fame only because of the time period that he dwelled in. He was a product of his time. You know, as David Bowie says, you know, time may change me, but I can't change time. And I think that's important because 2019 is a lot different, you know, than the 1880s or the 1960s either. Time has evolved. The main thing is we should know that Cap was a racist and that black mark should be on his record, but his record stands, his record stands as a great thing for Major League Baseball because he pioneered the modern game. And that's really the only thing that a Cap should be remembered as. Now, with that, my baby dolls, I'm wrapping up another session of Genesis. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm going to be on probably a little bit more next month. February, March, we'll reconvene. And as always, in the immortal words of Edward R. Murrow, good night, folks, and good luck.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.